He knocked me over. I landed on the dog bowl.
This one's wife. A statement from Prince Harry. Harry, you total twat. Detailed analysis. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. As I reported yesterday, Harry lost his appeal in the Court of Appeal and then released a pre-recorded Whinge-a-thon interview with the BBC. But it didn't stop there. He also released a prepared statement. As I explained yesterday, the judgment will have been given to the parties a number of days, maybe even a week or so earlier. It wasn't handed down until yesterday in court, which meant beforehand there was an embargo so that nobody but the parties would have access to the information, and if that got into the public domain, it would be a contempt of court with serious consequences. This, however, did give Harry the opportunity to contact the BBC so that he could sit down and whinge and also prepare the statement that was issued. I'm going to analyse the statement to break it down on an evidential basis. However, before I do so, it's important to understand what's the actual issue here. RAVEC, which is the Executive Committee for the Protection of Royal and Public Figures, withdrew Harry's security and did so by not following its 2017 policy. What was that policy? The policy was that RAVEC would evaluate a risk analysis conducted by its own risk management board in order to determine which individuals should receive protection. Accordingly, each time they should do a risk management assessment, a risk analysis, the risk management board should do that, and that should be supplied to RAVEC before it made its decision about the use of protection. RAVEC did not commission a risk analysis from the risk management board before it made its decision concerning Harry. Therefore, on the face of it, RAVEC didn't follow its own procedures. And therefore, on the face of it, one can understand why Harry complained. The principle, and this is embodied in case law, is that a public body must, in the absence of good reason, follow its own policies. The question then became, did RAVEC have a good reason not to follow its 2017 policy when it made its decision concerning Harry? The judge, at first instance in the High Court, decided that it did have a good reason. Harry appealed against this, and he needed to show that the first instance judge's decision about RAVEC's decision was wrong. Harry sought to do so on 4 grounds, summarised as follows. 1. The judge wrongly identified the standard of review as a matter of law. 2. The judge wrongly deferred to the judgment of the RAVEC decision makers. 3. The process went wrong somewhere. 4. The decision was in essence irrational. That was the basis of his appeal. The Court of Appeal, consisting of 3 senior judges, experienced judges, including the Master of the Rolls, dismissed his appeal. And it did so because it needed to consider, was it the case that Sir Richard, the main decision maker, did he fail to follow RAVEC's policy? Yes, he did. But did he have good reason to do so, or did he do it without good reason? However, the Court of Appeal decided there were 4 main reasons why, as a matter of law, Sir Richard did have a good reason for not following the policy. Firstly, RAVEC's policy was inward-facing and unpublished and concerned an area of national importance that was peculiarly within the expertise of law enforcement agencies, RAVEC, and the royal household. Secondly, In this area of high political sensitivity, the court had considerable respect for Sir Richard and Ravek as decision makers because they had unrivaled expertise and experience in the field of royal protection. Wasn't Harry crying out in his interview for it to be left to the experts? Thirdly, the decision was explained in contemporaneous documents to the effect that the Risk Management Board would not undertake further risk analyses for the Duke of Sussex because they were no longer required given the alternative governance arrangements that were to be established on a case-by-case basis for the future. In other words, because Harry has protection, albeit he has to notify them on 28 days' notice, the fact that there is that case-by-case protection in place was another reason why there was a good reason not to undertake the risk analysis. Fourthly, Sir Richard and Ravek had given compelling reasons for having reached the conclusion that the appropriate course was to establish bespoke arrangements for when the Duke of Sussex returned to the UK on future visits, i.e. not adopting a blanket policy, but rather, as and when he turns up, we will address security arrangements as and when that occurs. We're not removing security from him per se, we're simply stating that he gets it on a case-by-case basis, a bespoke arrangement. Outside the United Kingdom, he was outside that cohort, but when in the United Kingdom, his security would be considered as appropriate depending on the circumstances. It was impossible to say that this reasoning was illogical or inappropriate. Indeed, it seemed sensible. But the court went even further. Not only did they say that there were 4 reasons why the deviation from the process was done with good reason, they explained that even if there had been a risk analysis from the Risk Management Board, it would very likely have only confirmed the threat, vulnerability and impact levels which the Duke of Sussex had faced when earlier risk analyses were undertaken. In other words, it would just confirm what they already knew and therefore wouldn't actually add anything, and indeed wouldn't have anything new to say with regard to the critical features of a change situation which a bespoke situation would require. In other words, Harry's better off with a bespoke situation than he is than relying on previous analyses. Accordingly, the Court of Appeal decided that the judge was right to decide that Ravek could depart from its usual policy, and its reasons for doing so were good reasons. Thus, Harry failed. And he's been landed with an estimated £1.5 million cost bill. But he still has protection. Nobody's taking it away from him. It's the methodology of it that seems to be causing a problem for him, or is it? What then is Harry's grievance? What is he getting his panties in a bunch about? He still has protection. It is fundamental that people recognise that. He just can't swan in at the drop of a hat like some major power player and have the security forces of the United Kingdom running around after him. He has to tell them that he's coming, and then the arrangements will be put in place. But the sense of entitlement that Harry and his wife have is such that they don't want to be beholden to that arrangement, although I think anybody else would look at it and think to themselves, well, that's entirely sensible, isn't it? It's a little bit like if a friend drops in to see you with a family and says, we've come to stay for a week. You would say, well, some notice would have been good. I haven't got enough food in, I haven't turned down the beds, have we got enough beds for everybody to sleep in, etc., etc. Give me some notice and I'll be able to prepare a bespoke situation for you so that you're all accommodated. But the haughtiness that's exhibited by Harry and this one's wife, the sense of entitlement, is such that they just want to be able to swan in when they want and have everybody run around after them. There's also more to it, as I'll come to. Harry's response, as you know, was to release the interview with the BBC and also issue a statement. I'm going to break that statement down for you. Harry wrote, "I want to start by thanking my legal team and the Court of Appeal judges for their time and expertise in unravelling this issue that stemmed from the previous government. This process has only ever been about ensuring my safety and that of my immediate family when we are in the United Kingdom, so that we may safely visit my home country with the same level of security that other governments deem necessary for our protection." One presumes that he's talking about Colombia and Nigeria, where, of course, they turned up and immediately there was lots of security. That makes them feel important. That makes them feel like the grand poobah. But the point is, they would get the same level of security based upon the 28 days notice. But what he and his wife want is the importance of just being able to essentially arrive. They would give some notification, of course, but maybe not 28 days. And that immediately they would be met at the airport and there would be police outriders, etc., snipers positioned on roofs and all of the extensive security that would be prepared and provided at a drop of a hat. They want to make the grand entrance, and we've seen this, haven't we, as a consequence of the ridiculous security shenanigans that they've engaged in just recently in New York. He continues, "My ask has been simple, that the standard protocols for security and risk assessments be applied to me in the same way they are to others, including people who have never carried out any public functions on behalf of the state." He thinks he's being prejudiced unfairly. Yes, he is being treated differently, but circumstances are different because he left as a working royal, which means different considerations apply, which means he is going to be treated differently. But that's not unfair. He chose that situation. He made his bed. He now has to lie in it. They are not saying to him, "You are having no security whatsoever." They're simply saying the arrangements have altered. The court's ruling confirms that the Executive Committee for the Protection of Royalty and Public Figures, known as RAVEC, and comprised of senior officials from the Royal Household, Home Office and Metropolitan Police, has failed to follow its own mandated processes for me, which are applied to all other high-risk and high-profile individuals. He is correct, but he makes one major omission. He omits to say that they failed, but did so with good reason. A good reason that has been established by a High Court judge and 3 Court of Appeal judges. Given my profound concerns over this issue, I will be writing to the Home Secretary to ask her to urgently examine the matter and review the RAVEC process. Wah, wah, wah. Big baby. This legal action has been a last resort, but one that has uncovered shocking truths, although essentially you don't say what they are, starting with the fact that the royal household are key decision makers on RAVEC and my sole representation for matters regarding my safety. Well, surely it is sensible to involve the royal household. After all, they know the way that the royal family operates. They are experts. Therefore, wouldn't you want that input from them, rather than asking, for instance, 4 men in a pub in Doncaster what they think the arrangements should be? This, of course, is the paranoia, because basically Harry and this one's wife, and she's behind this because she has cultivated this paranoia in the Ginger Prince. He's paranoid anyway because of what's happened to his mother. He's paranoid because of the infighting that goes on within families, which is exacerbated because they all have a staff and supporters. But she has an inherent paranoia as a narcissist, and she stoked his paranoia to this degree, whereby he basically thinks, this has all been done to spite me. This has all been done because I left as a working royal member of the family. This is all being done to be nasty to me. And he's losing sight of the fact that he still has protection. It's just applied in a different way. And the application of that has been deemed to be done with good reason, something that the courts, an independent judiciary, have established. He goes on to state, I've also learned the names of all those involved, many of whom retired immediately after playing their part. Is this some kind of threat from Harry? I know who you are. We know where you live. In November 2017, before the royal household's role on Ravek was known, this secretive committee concluded that when my wife would join the royal family, she should not receive protection. Only when I asked for the name of the person willing to carry that risk did they reverse the decision. Accordingly, he is firmly of the view, no doubt stoked by his wife, that they're against his wife. We don't know whether that's accurate or not, but it doesn't seem to be relevant to the question that was before the court. In 2020, Ravek refused for the first time to conduct the required annual risk, threat and impact assessment that their own policies demand. Yes, and why was that, Harry? Because circumstances have changed, because you and your wife left the royal family as working members. Therefore, Ravek utilised an alternative procedure. And the courts have established that they had good reason to do so. It wasn't arbitrary, it wasn't capricious. They didn't just decide, right, let's decide what Harry's security arrangement should be by, I don't know, throwing these magnetic letters against a fridge and seeing what they spell out. No, they deviated from the procedure, which does provide a ground for complaint, but they did so with good reason. That is sensible. Oh, hang on a second. I've told you that this is the way that you ought to do your job, but you've gone and done something different today to get to the same result. Yes, I deviated from it because that machine wasn't working, so I decided I had to go and commandeer a different one. Oh, well, that's a good reason why that you've deviated from the usual procedure. Carry on. That's in essence what we're seeing here. The intention of this assessment, Harry continues, is to be objective and free from bias and interference to confirm the security required. The result was stripping me of the protection I've had since birth. Well, that's not quite accurate. What he should write is, the result was changing the method of protection that I've had since birth. He makes it sound like he's got no protection now, and that's not accurate. He also adds, while signalling to all other governments to do the same. No, they're not. That's his paranoia speaking. This reckless action knowingly put me and my family in harm's way. How? How has it put you in harm's way? You still get protection. Therefore, it doesn't put you in harm's way. One would suggest that your own conduct and behaviour and that of your wife has resulted in that. Life is precious, and I understand the fragility of it. This is the words of this one's wife, who clearly has had input into this statement, as invariably she would because of her interfering and controlling ways. Throughout 2020 and 2021, I attempted to resolve this issue privately, he writes, even offering to independently cover the costs of necessary and effective police protection in order to keep me and my family safe. Well, that's a fair enough offer. But the problem is, Harry, the British police force isn't for hire when it's carrying guns. That would set a very dangerous precedent. Again, you want it on your terms. You and your wife, even offering to pay for it, want to make the big show of arrival. Whereas the suggestion is, no, you will be given security, but on the basis that we see it, not the way that you want it, because it's all about showiness with you two. No one responded directly to me about my offer, cry me a river, when I made it, and even though I challenged the refusal to let me pay, my legal claim failed. The law was against you, Harry. The law. To this present day, the royal household remains my sole representation on Ravek for every visit and could call for this assessment to be done at any point. The only possible conclusion that can be drawn is they choose not to because they know the outcome would prove that my security should never have been removed in the first place. But it hasn't been removed, it's been changed. And that isn't what the Court of Appeal concluded, Harry. Once again, his dim-wittedness and paranoia cause him to fail to understand what the actual issue was and how the court has actually reached that decision. In recent years, my family and I have been subjected to well-documented neo-Nazi and extremist threats, including from Al-Qaeda. There are individuals in prison on UK soil because of such threats. But doubtless that's true. But once again, protection remains. And so it should, because he is a high-profile member of the royal family and a potential target. So he should receive protection. He keeps trying to make it sound like it's been taken away from him. It hasn't. It's the basis on which the protection is established and tailored that has altered. He has lost nothing other than the automatic blanket, all bells and whistles approach that obviously his ego and arrogance and that of his controlling wife require. And yet, since 2019, a proper risk assessment has not been conducted. Again, we know that, Harry, and the reason was because it was done for good reasons, something that a High Court judge and 3 Court of Appeal judges have established. You can keep banging on as long as you like, saying, they haven't done a proper risk assessment. They haven't done a proper risk assessment. We know they haven't done a proper risk assessment because the court has decided that there were several good reasons for them not to follow that procedure. And in any event, and I will repeat this, even if there had been a risk analysis from the Risk Management Board, it would very likely have only confirmed the threat, vulnerabilities and impact levels which the Duke of Sussex had faced when earlier risk analyses were undertaken. But it would have had nothing to say on the critical features of the changed situation, namely the need for protective security on future uncertain visits and the government's appetite for risk. Accordingly, Harry, what they're telling you is, even if they'd done a risk assessment, it wouldn't have added anything. Indeed, it needed a more bespoke approach because you changed things by no longer being a working member of the royal family and moving abroad. He continues stating, this is not only a deviation from standard practice, we know that, but it's done with good reason. It's a dereliction of duty. No, it's not. It's been done with good reason. The stark difference is I was born into lifelong circumstances that create inherent security risks. Indeed, you were, and that is still recognised. My decade of military service, particularly 2 tours of duty in Afghanistan, as well as social and tabloid media frenzy, have only intensified those threats. Well, at that juncture, you have to question who has been responsible for intensifying those threats. Could it be your idiocy in talking about killing members of the Taliban in your book? Might it be that the tabloid frenzy has been generated by your attention-hungry wife, maybe? You've brought it, to a large extent, on yourselves. Uncovering how my immediate family's safety was knowingly put at risk, as well as who was behind it and who sanctioned it, has been truly devastating. He doesn't say who this is and what's actually going on here, and I think this is what is at the heart of it. He knows certain people have made the decision not to follow the usual procedure and that they've basically said he's not getting the blanket protection, he's getting a bespoke arrangement instead. And rather than Harry go, right, hang on a second, let me just think about this. So I'm still getting protection, absolutely. And it's tailored to my changed circumstances. It absolutely is. And I won't have to pay for it. No, you won't. All right, that's all good. What he's done is he's gone like this. So who's made this decision? X. I fucking hate X. He's always had it in for me. Yeah, but Harry, that's irrelevant. What matters is you still get protection. I'm not listening. And it's bespoke to your circumstances. I'm not listening. And it's still paid for by the taxpayer. I'm not listening. All I'm focusing on is who's the decision maker. So he's not actually concentrating on the decision. He's clearly got a paranoid bee in his bonnet about the person that has made the decision. That his narcissistic trait of resentment and defiance, both of those traits have been riding high, causing him to actually ignore the fact that he still has protection, it's bespoke and it's paid for, and causes him to focus instead on who this decision maker is, although he never says who the person is. That's what has got to him. That's what is at the nub of all of this. Whoever this person is, he doesn't like them. And that has clouded his dim-witted judgment to the extent that he fails to appreciate the legal basis on which his challenge has failed, the fact that good reasons were utilised for deviating from the process and not following the usual standard procedure, and that he still gains protection, just in a different way. Instead, it's all become about who this person or persons are, and that's the vendetta that he's been pursuing. No matter where we may agree or disagree, I would never wish harm on anyone. These legal proceedings have revealed to me that this basic duty of care was not and is not applied to me. Wrong. It's true that I have been treated as an exception on this issue. The conditions of my security were not based on threat, risk and impact. They were made on my role, one that my wife and I wanted to maintain. But that was ultimately refused. Ravek's ability to make decisions outside of its own policies and the so-called political sensitives of my case have prevailed over the need for fair and consistent decision-making. No, your role has changed. Ravek altered its approach with good reason. A High Court judge and 3 Court of Appeal judges have agreed with that. The court has decided to defer to this. No, they haven't deferred to it. They've looked at it objectively as judges do. But once again, your baby huff in all of this causes you to basically think, oh, they're on their side. They've deferred to them. The court has decided to defer to this, revealing a sad truth. My hands are tied in seeking legal recourse against the establishment. Well, first of all, you are part of the establishment, you dim-witted moron. But moreover, your hands aren't tied. You were able to take legal recourse. In fact, you were in a better position to do so than many people because you're wealthy. Many people can't do anything about it because they lack the means to hire expensive solicitors and barristers. But you've been able to do so. Your hands haven't been tied at all. Utterly ridiculous. This all comes from the same institutions that preyed upon my mother. Here we go, spooning more Diana into it, getting her in, always ensuring that she gets a mention. It's clear that this has had a very substantial impact on Harry, and it very much clouds his judgment. The same institutions that openly campaigned for the removal of our security, no, the alteration of your security, and that continue to incite hatred towards me. Now, this is a gratuitous allegation. First of all, who is doing this? Where's the evidence of this incitement? And yet again, notice hatred. Not the fact it's criticism. No, it's hatred. The paranoia is rampant. Continue to incite hatred towards me, my wife, and even our children, while at the same time protecting the very power that they should be holding accountable. Once again, this is all about this man's vendetta, undoubtedly G'd up and stoked by his wife, that he thinks that certain people have got it in for them, and this is the result of it. Rather than recognising that he still has paid for protection on a bespoke basis, rather than understanding that several judges, independent, objective judges, have reached a decision goes against him, of course, he wants his own way. She wants her own way, and this is the result of it. The UK is my birthplace and will always be part of who I am. It is a place I love and the country where my son was born. I only ever wanted to continue my charitable work in supporting the causes and people that mean so much to me and for my children to know the beauty of my homeland. Wah, pity play. I remain committed to a life of public service. Really, you've got a funny way of showing it. This has been and always will be my life's work, and when you strip away the noise, you'll be able to hear all I've been asking for is safety. That's clearly come from this one's wife, because that's the type of bollocks that she spouts. Harry, your safety is not an issue. You are still afforded protection. Do you really think that your father would allow you to turn up with your wife and your children, or as you described them in another comment as my father's grandchildren, so that you have to turn up and stand amongst all of the proles at Heathrow Airport, wait outside for a taxi, and then get in a taxi weaving its way through and then have to go and stay in a Premier Inn? Of course he wouldn't. The fact is, Harry, you still have protection. And what we have here is quite simply a gigantic whinge by a dim-witted, self-absorbed individual, once again infected by the behaviours of his wife, who has failed to understand that 1. The judicial system, which is a method of recourse that was open to him, has found against him and has done so on the basis of a sound application of the law. 2. He still has protection, just not the way that it once was, but he's still protected and it's still paid for by the taxpayer. 3. It evidences significant levels of paranoia. 4. It also raises the possibility that part of this is about the pursuit of information. confidential information, as by being the IPP status, and fifthly, that it involves a vendetta against certain people that he is against for reasons unspecified, which has clouded his judgment. This is my detailed breakdown of the statement of Prince Harry, and it's important to rehearse what was actually at issue with the court decision, and to break down what his statement states and how it's completely wrong, based upon the court's finding and the evidence. As always, I encourage you to go to the evidence. Thank you for your patience in listening to this detailed analysis. It's important to do these things properly, and I'd also appreciate it if you bring other people's attention to this work so that they can understand the true nature of what's gone on here, and also that they understand the nature of the breakdown and how that statement is wholly incorrect. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.